प्राप्यस्य ब्रह्मणो रूपं प्राप्तुश्च प्रत्यगात्मनः प्राप्त्युपायं फलं चैव तथा प्राप्ति विरोधि च वदन्ति सकला वेदाः सेतिहास पुराणकाः मुनयश्च महात्मानः वेद वेदार्थवादिनः. Arthapanchaka Jnana is a prerequisite for moksha. All our shastras endeavor to provide us with this Arthapanchaka Jnana. The nature of the Supreme Paramatma Swarupam. The nature of every individual soul, Jivatma Swarupam. The means to attain the goal, Upaya Swarupam. The hurdles that come in the way of attaining the goal, Virodhi Swarupam. And finally, the ultimate destination, the goal of all goals, Purushartha Swarupam. The Vedas and Vedanta provide us with this Arthapanchaka Jnana. The Vedas are divided into various segments. Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, Upanishads. The Samhita Bhaga of Vedas deal with various mantras. The Brahmana Bhaga deals with the rituals that are to be performed using the mantras that are provided in the Samhitas. The Aranyakas, by the very name, they deal with conversations between an Acharya and his Sishyas in forests, Aranya, Aranyaka. And then Vedasya Antaha, Vedantaha. The Anta, the very end of Vedas. The word end has two meanings. End meaning conclusion, end meaning the very goal. Upanishads are called Vedanta because it is through the Upanishads that we inquire into truth, reality, and realize the Parabrahman. The beauty of the Upanishads is that they convey profound wisdom with which we can realize truth. The journey of life is nothing but a quest for truth. Our quest for happiness is essentially our quest for truth. And Upanishads enable us to embark on this journey, dive deep into knowing reality, knowing the Tattva-traya, the triad of reality. The Paramatma, Ishvara, Bhagavan, Narayana, the Jivatma, which is the Achit-tattva, and Prakriti, which is the world of matter, which is Achit-tattva. Chit, Achit, Ishvara. The way the Upanishads are structured is so very beautiful. The Upanishads are nothing but conversations between rishis and their disciples. And it is in these conversations that the wisdom is embedded. The Upanishads also have several inspiring stories. And through these stories, the Upanishads convey profound messages, profound truth. So today, we have all assembled here amidst the serene surroundings to relish Vedanta Katha Samgraha. That's the title. Inspiring stories from the Upanishads. So therefore, it is storytelling time. Stories that are very interesting, and at the same time, they give us an opportunity to reflect on the truth, reflect on the nature of reality. Every story involves very inspiring characters. Most often, we don't get to study these characters. And some of these characters also happen to be part of our Itihasas and Puranas as well. So I have chosen today to cover 5 inspiring stories, selected from few Upanishads. We will start our journey by seeking truth. So therefore, the first story will be the story of the seeker of the truth, Satyakama Jabala. Now, when we are on this journey towards knowing truth, knowing reality, it is very important for us to cultivate certain values. There are certain foundational values which are important to be cultivated, key principles that govern life and living. Therefore, the second story will be from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The first one is from Chandogya, the second from Brihadaranyaka, interestingly titled as Da. While all of us are mumukshus, we often have this question: Grihasthashrama, is it a vehicle or not for mumukshus? Therefore, the third story will clearly give us the answer as to how Grihasthashrama indeed is a vehicle for mumukshus to attain the destination. It is from Maitreyi Brahmana of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, a glorious conversation between Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. The fourth story is, of course, from our very dear Upanishad, which is Katopanishad, the conversation between Nachiketa and Yama, where we get to know that in the journey of life, it is important to know what happens to the journey after death. The journey of the Atman through life and beyond life. And then we will look into the story of Indra and Virochana from Chandogya, which will also tell us what happens upon Moksha. So 5 simple little stories through which we will understand few important truths. Satyakama Jabala. Satyakama was a very young boy who carried with him a flame of aspiration, of knowing reality. He wanted to be initiated by a guru. He was in search of a guru who would initiate him into the world of knowledge. He was very keen to acquire Brahmajnana. Satyakama was therefore going around in search of a guru. But he also knew that he had an unsurmountable challenge. In those days, a guru would accept a disciple only if the disciple's lineage, ancestry is known. And Satyakama was fatherless. He did not know either his father or his ancestry. So therefore, he had a very unique challenge. But then he had an intense flame of aspiration burning inside him. Therefore, he approached his mother, Jabala, who was a maidservant. And then he approached her, and then he asked her, "Mother, I have been wanting to ask you this question for a long time. Who is my father?" Jabala was dreading for this very moment. She was always trying to avoid answering this very question. But then she mustered courage and then she spoke, "My dear son, I am a maid servant, and in the past I was exploited by many in power. Therefore, I do not know who your father is. But I have no qualms to accept reality, accept facts. And therefore, I can courageously say that while I do not know your father, you are my son. You are Satyakama, I am Jabala. Therefore, you are Satyakama Jabala. Be proud to go and declare this to the world." Knowing this truth, which was harsh, which was not easy to digest, Satyakama Jabala proceeded towards Haridrumata Gautama Ashrama. Haridrumata Gautama was a renowned rishi, and when Satyakama approached Gautama, he was asked, "Who are you and why are you here?" Satyakama then shares his intense longing with Gautama. Immediately Gautama asks him, "To which Gotra you belong? What is your lineage? Who is your father?" Satyakama proudly answers, "My dear master, while I do not know who my father is, I can proudly say I am son of Jabala, therefore I am Satyakama Jabala." While all the pupils around there were shocked that somebody could openly admit to this harsh reality, Gautama Muni was so pleasantly pleased. Here is a boy who was backed by the honesty of his mother. Here was a boy with all the integrity, seeking truth, who was proud to declare what is a fact, and he was ready to accept truth and seek truth. Gautama immediately accepted Satyakama Jabala and said, "You are qualified to walk on the path of knowing truth because you are truthful." And Satyakama Jabala, therefore, was accepted by the illustrious Gautama as his disciple. Immediately, the teaching began. Satyakama was taken to a farm, and then immediately Gautama said, "Here are 400 cows, 400 weak cows, weak and sick cows." He said, "Herd them, take care of them, take them to the forest and come back when they are healthy, and come back when they become 1,000 in number." All of us would wonder, here is a little boy with an intense flame of longing to know Brahman, seeking Brahmajnana, goes to Gautama, and Gautama, instead of teaching him Brahmajnana, asks him to herd cows in the forest. Why would he do that? The ways of rishis were only known to them. A guru knows what is the ideal sadhana for his sishya. A guru knows the swabhava and the swadharma of a sishya, and the guru knows how to ensure that the sishya gets prepared to walk on the path of knowing truth. And therefore, Satyakama took up this challenge and he herded the cows and went into the forest. 400 cows. And he spent days, months, years. Years passed by, but while tending to the cows and taking care of them in the forest, Satyakama spent doing tapasya. Day in or day out, weeks, months, years, intense tapasya, and praying to his guru so that he can come back to the ashrama to start his studies on Brahmajnana. As the years rolled by, there came a day when it was time for Satyakama to return to the ashrama. The 400 weak cows became 1,000 healthy cows. The deity of the cows, Vrishabha, miraculously manifested in front of Satyakama and said, "Satyakama, you are already prepared to know Brahman, and therefore let me now share the first truth with you. And Vrishabha declared, Hey Satyakama, know him, know that Brahman as Prakashavan. Meditate on that Brahman as Prakashavan. Prakashavan, the one who manifests. The message, the purport of this declaration is that when one starts meditating on that Supreme Being, Prakashavan, manifests in a form that can be grasped by a seeker. So the first truth Vrishabha shares with Satyakama, saying, meditate on Brahman. As you travel back to Gautama's ashrama, start meditating on him as Prakashavan. The next day, as Satyakama approaches Gautama ashrama, he kindles Agni, and Agni Deva appears in front of him and says, Hey Satyakama, it is time now to share with you the second truth. Meditate on that Brahman as Anantavan. It is very interesting that the second facet of the truth given to Satyakama is the first one being Prakashavan, the one who manifests. Just because he manifests does not limit him in any way. Because we all have this question all the time. Bhagavan has Divya Mangala Vigraha. He has a divine form. But if he has a divine form, does the form limit him? Just like how the material forms have limitations. Whereas Bhagavan is all-pervading. So therefore, just because he has divine form does not mean that he cannot pervade the entire universe. He is infinite, Ananta, Anantavan. Therefore, with the second truth, Satyakama also realizes that both formlessness and form coexist together. There are no conflicts or contradictions whatsoever. When it comes to Bhagavan, he is formless because he pervades and permeates this entire universe. At the same time, he also has a divine form. The third day, Satyakama, with all the 1,000 cows, is approaching Gautama. And then a Hamsa Pakshi miraculously appears in front of him. And the Hamsa Pakshi addresses Satyakama. Hey Satyakama, it is time now to give you the third truth. Meditate on that Brahman as Jyotishman. Jyotishman, the one who is effulgent. Effulgence here stands for knowledge, jnana. One who has infinite jnana and one who gives jnana to everyone. So therefore, meditate on him as Jyotishman. So with that, Satyakama further proceeds, and the fourth day, a Mudgha Pakshi, a water bird, appears in front of Satyakama and says, the fourth truth that we were supposed to give you, He Satyakama, meditate on that Brahman as Ayatanavan. Ayatanavan means one who is the substratum of this entire universe. Ayatanavan, the one who supports and sustains everything. With this, Satyakama gets four important truths. That Parabrahman, Narayana, is Prakashavan. He is Anantavan. He is Jyotishman. He is Ayatanavan. And with this, now Satyakama's tejas grows. He is glowing as he approaches Gautama. Gautama sees him afar and he knows, my Sishya is now ready, because he is glowing. And as he comes towards his Sishya, towards his Guru, even before he asks, Gautama goes and embraces his Sishya and says, you are now ready for taking the next step in knowing the Brahman. And therefore, we will immediately start the sharing of the knowledge. And thus begins a wonderful journey of this little boy, Satyakama. Later on, Satyakama himself goes on to become an illustrious rishi who is celebrated across the Upanishads. So therefore, this story of Satyakama Jabala also tells us one important historical fact. Now, we all think in ancient India, patriarchy alone ruled. Now, here is an incident which clearly demonstrates that it was not just patriarchy or the male lineage which was used, which was practiced. The Satyakama Jabala's story also tells us how even women were given so importance in society, and Gautama Muni accepted Satyakama knowing that he was fatherless based on honesty of his mother. Also, Satyakama's journey based on acquiring Brahmajnana based on that Shraddha and the intense flame of desire to know Brahman is also a great example for all of us, to inspire us to seek truth, to seek Brahmajnana. To seek Brahmajnana, we need to do sadhana. And this sadhana has to be on a foundation of certain fundamental principles, fundamental values. So therefore, the story of Prajapati and his Sishyas being the Devas, the Asuras, and the Manushyas, all the three. It seems there was a time when the Devas, the Asuras, and the Manushyas all approached Prajapati and accepted and requested him to accept them as his Sishyas. Prajapati accepted them. And then the Devas approach Prajapati. Hey Prajapati, instruct us, give us knowledge, teach us. Prajapati immediately looked at the Devas and said, and the Devas were very pleased and they said, thank you. The Manushyas approached Prajapati and said, hey Prajapati, please teach us, instruct us. Prajapati looked at the Manushyas and said, the Manushyas said, thank you. The Asuras approached Prajapati and said, hey Prajapati, teach us, instruct us, initiate us into the world of knowledge. Prajapati looked at the Asuras and said, the Asuras also understood. Now the Manushyas understood, the Devas understood, the Asuras also understood Prajapati's instructions. We are lost in terms of what's going on. Prajapati said, foundation for any journey are three das, the. He looked at the Devas and said, did you understand? Devas looked around and said, yes Prajapati, we understood. The stands for Dhamma. Prajapati looked at the Manushyas and said, did you understand my instruction? Yes Prajapati, we understood your instruction. The stands for Dana, Datta. He looked at the Asuras, hey Asuras, did you understand my instruction? The Asuras immediately said, yes, we understand. Prajapati, your instruction for us, the Daya. The Dhamma, Dana, Daya. Dhamma is the gateway to 6 treasures. We are required to acquire 6 treasures, 6-fold treasures. We are chasing all kinds of treasures in our life, but the Shastras say the only treasure that one should acquire is a 6-fold treasure. Sama, Dhamma, Upariti, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhana. And Dhamma is the doorway, gateway. So, Sama and Dhamma are like twins. The Shama is mind mastery, Dhamma is sense mastery. Restraint and renunciation. These are foundational to any spiritual journey. Now, restraint is about avoiding engagement of interaction with the world. Avoiding engagement with the worldly objects, with the sense objects. Avoiding, regulating. Avoiding is renunciation. Restraint is regulating our interaction with sense objects. This is restraint. Whereas renunciation is avoiding interaction, giving up interaction with sense objects. Restraint and renunciation are like routes in our journey. But it is not just enough if we have the routes to our destination. We also need the fuel. Because practicing restraint and renunciation is not easy at all. It drains us of tremendous energy. To restrain ourselves, to engage in interacting with sense objects is not easy at all. Now, think of renunciation. It is going one step further. While we can even restrain ourselves and limit our interaction with sense objects, giving them up, which is renunciation, is very, very challenging. So therefore, both restraints and renunciation are like roots on our journey. Having these roots alone is not enough. We need the fuel that will ensure that we are moving forward. What is that fuel? The fuel is bhakti. Only with bhakti we can have the energy, because with bhakti we will be able to turn the direction of our senses and our mind away from the sense objects. Practicing both shama and dhamma becomes easy only when the fuel of bhakti is added. Otherwise, yes, one can practice Ashtanga Yoga with great difficulty, but it is not easy for each and every one. And therefore, adding that fuel of bhakti becomes easy. So Prajapati gave a very important message. While he gave 3 principles to Vanda to the Devas, Vanda to the Asuras, Vanda to the Manushas. Dhamma to the Devas, Daya to the Asuras, and Dana to Manushas. So, Dana to Manushas. Dana is giving. He specifically gives to Manushas because Manushas are blessed with abundance. And we are expected to co-create abundance when we live in this world. Sahayajna prajasrishtva purovacha prajapatihi. Anena prashavishyadvam yeshavostvishta kamadhuk. Krishna says in the Gita. The principle way on which creation happens is yajna, law of giving. And Manushas are blessed with abundance of resources, and it is our duty to co-create abundance, not just consume. Resources are given to us not to make us only consumers. Resources are given to us so that while we consume, we also keep contributing more, practice dana. And that is the reason why Prajapati gives the principle of dana to Manushas. He gives the principle of daya to Asuras. Asuras who are endowed with enormous power. Asuras are those who believe might is right. And therefore, daya, compassion as a principle is given to Asuras so that with compassion, they transform their belief, which is might is right, to right is might. Compassion is a key foundational value. So many times we practice compassion as a position, which means by practicing compassion, the position of feeling, being seen as good. When we are compassionate, others see as being good. Therefore, the position of being compassionate is always nice. But then what happens if we practice compassion as a position? If others stop looking at us as being compassionate, then we would possibly not find the need to be compassionate. We are always wanting for endorsement from others. So compassion as a position will not be sustainable. Similarly, we also practice compassion as an emotion. Feel good. It feels good when we are kind to someone. It definitely feels good. But the danger there is something else may make us feel good, and soon we will stop being compassionate because something else is going to make us feel good. So it's not sustainable if compassion remains only as an emotion. Compassion should be the very foundation, not just a position or an emotion, a foundation, very expression of our life and living, a foundational value, and that is the reason why it is given to the Asuras. Prajapati gives Dhamma to the Devas who have lots of riches. Swargaloka is filled with riches. Therefore, they have been instructed, yes, you are blessed with luxuries, but remember, luxuries don't last. You need to practice restraint and eventually renunciation, because these are the routes to take you to final destination. And therefore, the Devas have been given the value of the Dhamma. The beauty here is all the three are applicable to us. There is a Devi part in us, an Asuri part in us, and a Manushya part in us. And all three, Dhamma, Dana, and Daya, are equally applicable to us. And therefore, in the path of seeking truth, we should always remember the three Das, the. While we are journeying on the spiritual path, all of us Grihasthas have this question. Grihasthashrama dharma is definitely a big responsibility. How can this be a vehicle for moksha? And the Shastras are very, very clear about this. Grihasthashrama dharma is integral to, it is at the center of the ashrama dharma, and it is definitely the right vehicle to attain moksha. There is no requirement for sannyasa to attain moksha. It is not needed. Being in Grihasthashrama dharma, the mumukshus can attain the final goal. This is where the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the legend of Maitreyi's conversation with Yajnavalkya. If there is any conversation, possibly this is possibly the foremost of all conversations, most inspiring conversations that ever happened between a husband and a wife. Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. Yajnavalkya, we see him also in Itihasas and Puranas. Yajnavalkya is an illustrious rishi, the seer of Shukla Yajurveda. Vyasa propagated Krishna Yajurveda through Vaishampayana. On the first day, we discussed how Vedavyasa propagated the 4 parts of the Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharvana, through 4 different rishis. He propagated Krishna Yajurveda, the Yajurveda that is propagated by Vyasa through Vaishampayana is popularly called Krishna Yajurveda. Now, Vaishampayana is uncle of Yajnavalkya. Vaishampayana's sister, Sunanda, married Brahmarata, who is also called Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya and Sunanda's son is Yajnavalkya, the illustrious Yajnavalkya, who strides like a colossus throughout Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. His contribution to Sanatana Dharma is unimaginable. Yajnavalkya married Katyayani, and she was a dutiful wife, and she was also worldly wise. She managed the entire ashrama of Yajnavalkya. As Yajnavalkya, he had several hundreds of disciples, and as he was engaged in teaching, and the affairs of the ashrama was taken care of by his wife Katyayani. Katyayani's dear friend Maitreyi. Maitreyi was daughter of Mitra, the minister in the kingdom of Mithila. Maitreyi was observing Yajnavalkya engaged in discourse on the Brahman day after day, and she was enamored. Maitreyi decided that if at all she had to marry Yajnavalkya. And therefore, she approaches her friend Katyayani, and also her mutual friend, the mutual friend of Maitreyi and Katyayani, Gargi, also helps the cause. And together, all 3 of them convince Yajnavalkya that he should also marry Maitreyi. Maitreyi, therefore, marries Yajnavalkya for only one reason, for Brahmajnana. And there begins a very beautiful bond between a husband and a wife, a bond which is rooted in seeking truth, in seeking Brahmajnana. While Katyayani was running the affairs of the ashrama, Maitreyi became Yajnavalkya's Sishya in learning Brahmajnana. Time passed by, and Yajnavalkya decided to renounce the world and take Vanaprastha. So he immediately called Katyayani and Maitreyi, and he said, I'm going to be leaving the ashrama today, and I have decided to divide the property that we have. For those days, rishis also had vast amounts of, not exactly wealth, but land, cows, other kinds of belongings. And He said, I'm going to divide our wealth in two parts. One part for you, Katyayani, the other for you, Maitreyi. Maitreyi very humbly then asked Yajnavalkya, hey Yajnavalkya, do you think this half of the property that you're sharing with me, do you think this is going to take me to moksha? This is going to guarantee moksha? Yajnavalkya smiled and he said, obviously not. Then she once again asked, what if you get us the wealth of the entire planet? Do you think that would help us attain moksha? Yajnavalkya smiled. Now he knows where Maitreyi is heading to. He said, definitely not. Then Maitreyi said, humbly said, I make an humble submission to you. Can you give me that wealth which will enable me to attain moksha? Yajnavalkya was so very pleased. And the conversation that ensued between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi is celebrated as Maitreyi Brahmana. Brahmana means chapter. The Upanishads are divided into various Brahmanas. Maitreyi Brahmana. Now this is once again, we need to constantly keep reminding us of the glory of women in ancient India. In Upanishads, we see several women rishis striding like colossus, and we see how they were given respect and how they were part of the process of learning. There are chapters in the Upanishads named after women. So therefore, in ancient India, if someone says anything like this word called discrimination, that word was never found in the ancient Indian dictionary. Maitreyi Brahmana. The conversation between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. Yajnavalkya then teaches Maitreyi, and in that process, he teaches how to spiritualize every relationship. Yajnavalkya teaches, hey Maitreyi, how can a husband-wife relationship be spiritualized? How can a relationship between a father and son be spiritualized? How can a relationship between a mother and a daughter be spiritualized? He talks about how in any relationship, the relationship grows by caring, and one should realize that spiritualization of a relationship is nothing but, simply put, Yajnavalkya makes it very simple. Profound knowledge made very simple. He gives a simple formula. Spiritualization of any relationship can happen by decreasing expectations and increasing contributions. Simple formula he gives. Any relationship can be spiritualized by decreasing expectations and increasing contribution. And he says the same is applicable not only for human relationships, but also our relationship with Bhagavan. Decreasing expectations, increasing contributions. Whereas we have the equation reversed. We want him to contribute to us more, and we have our expectations keep growing. And the same thing we practice in every relationship. Be it between a husband and wife, or between a daughter and a father, or between a son and a mother. A relationship can be, and he also talks about how every relationship can be spiritualized by connecting that relationship, bringing that relationship in connection with Krishna. And he says, hey Maitreyi, a husband does not become dear to the wife because the husband wills, because Bhagavan wills. A wife cannot become dear to a husband because the wife wills. It's because Bhagavan wills. A son does not become dear to a father because the son wills. It is Bhagavan who wills. Thus, he goes on teaching how by being in Grihasthashrama, one can spiritually grow. And towards the end of this glorious conversation, Yajnavalkya comes up with one of the most glorious declarations across all Upanishads. Atmavare drashtavyaha shotavyaha mantavyaha nididhyasitavyaha. One of the most popular declarations across the Upanishads. Atmavare drashtavyaha shotavyaha mantavyaha nididhyasitavyaha. To understand this, we just need to get the order correct. Shotavyaha mantavyaha nididhyasitavyaha drashtavyaha. He talks about the way to realize, the way to know, experience, realize, and eventually attain Brahman. Shrotavyaha. simple, but still challenging when it comes to practice. Shrotavyaha, constant listening to the glories of Bhagavan. Sounds very simple, but when a day is very tiring, Shrotavyaha also becomes very difficult. Not easy. Only when we have all the comforts, Shrotavyaha also becomes comfortable. But Shrotavyaha with or without comforts. That is the very foundation to any spiritual journey. Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha. Not just listening, manana, reflection. This is one important facet of our spiritual journey, and we practice this in our satsang. Reflection also means coming out, discussion, questioning with the right intent, sharing knowledge, and in that process, nourishing each other. We have to nourish each other and grow together. Any spiritual journey is not an individual growth. Shrotavyaha is individual. Mantavyaha need not be individual. It can be a collective effort. Reflection can be collective reflection, where we share our understanding, where we bring up questions, and where we get clarifications, and we nourish each other. Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nidhidhyasitavyaha, Drashtavyaha. Now, Nidhidhyasana and Darshana are actually synonymous. Now, I've already said this in the last session. Vedana, Upasana, Nidhidhyasana, Darshana. They're all contemplation, constant contemplation, dhyana, upasana, where you add love. And eventually the last stage of Nidhidhyasana, Upasana, Vedana is Darshana, where Bhagavan reveals his divine form. And it is in that revelation we experience supreme bliss. The bliss of contemplation, the bliss of dhyana is when he reveals his divine form to us. And when that happens, when we start soaking in his grace, that is when we start to experience Brahmananda. Atmavare drashtavyaha, shotavyaha, mantavyaha, nidhidhyasitavyaha. Thus, the supreme declaration of the ways and means of knowing, experiencing, realizing Parabrahman, Srimad Narayana, is very clearly instructed by Yajnavalkya to Maitreyi, which forms the part of Maitreyi Brahmana of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now, as we are journeying through this life and progressing spiritually, we also need to understand, we also need an answer to what happens to life. Is there life after death? What happens to all of us after death? Is it just a black hole? Does everything comes to a standstill? Does everything become meaningless? Is there anything after death? What is the journey after death? What happens? Is there something called moksha? Several questions like that are addressed in Katopanishad. So Nachiketas, again, we see the beauty of Upanishads is many times it involves little boys or little girls. Again, we see that it's a practice in ancient India to start on the path of acquiring Brahmajnana very early. Only today we say, let's maybe come to this path after retirement, maybe. And even retirement also we are not sure. Retirement can happen sometime in the future and we will come to this path after that. But it is very clear. We do not need to wait for retirement to happen to start embarking on this path. The Upanishads clearly demonstrate how early in life people can actually start on, and that is the right time. And here we see Nachiketas, a very inspiring character in the Upanishads. A young boy who is very, very intelligent, very bright, learning, wanting to know things, and he happens to be witnessing a yajna that his father Vajashravas does. And as part of the yajna in those days, the practice was to give dana, donate cows. Vajashravas was a little stingy. So he was choosing all the wrong cows to be given away. All the weak, sick cows to be given away. Now this bright little boy here knew this was wrong. Many times it happens, we do something wrong and our children immediately point out, especially in the public, it happens many times and we are embarrassed. It exactly happened to Vajashravas. He was, instead of giving all the healthy cows, he was giving away sick cows, all lean, thin, bony, about to die any time. He was basically disposing them off and giving them as dana in yajna. Nachiketas was a little concerned. He comes, Father, but at the same time, unlike kids of today, he's very polite. That also we should know. He puts things very politely. He looks at his father, he says, Father, Shastras say we need to give dana of things that we really want to possess, not the things that we want to dispose. But it looks like you are giving away something which is of not use to us. And then his father is ignoring him and he is very persistent. Then he goes to his father and says, Father, you possess me as well. Why don't you also give me up? And whom will you give me to as dana in yajna? Vajashravas is ignoring him. He is now getting irritated. But Nachiketas is a very young and steadfast in what he wants. Once again approaches his father. Everybody is looking. Everybody is witnessing what's going on. Goes again. Father, to whom are you going to give me? To whom are you going to give me as dana? Please, let me know. Vajashravas says, keep quiet. And he pushes him away. Again, after some time, he goes back. Father, to whom are you going to give me as dana? Vajashravas is in a fit of fury. He looks at him and he yells. He says, you know what? I'm going to give you to Yama as dana. In a fit of rage, he comes up with a statement and immediately everybody is shocked. How can a father give his son as gift to Yama? But Nachiketas takes this up as a challenge and he says, Father, now that you have made a vow, a pledge, you do not need to break it. I shall go to Yamaloka all by myself. Now that you have made me as dana, as an offering to Yama, I am now all set. And immediately Nachiketas packs his bags and starts his journey to Yamaloka. And Nachiketas travels all the way, and then unfortunately or fortunately, Vichitra Ishvara Shankalpa, Yama was not there when he visited. So the Yamakinkara say, there is no place for you here. You are not invited. No, you are an uninvited guest. You are a little boy. Why are you here? Go back. Nachiketas says, no way. I've come here on a mission. Until and unless I fulfill this mission, I'm not going back. So Nachiketas spends 3 full days and 3 nights right at the doorstep of Yama, and finally Yama reaches. He looks at Nachiketas and he comes to know that he has been waiting for 3 days and 3 nights. Yama is really shocked, looking at the resoluteness of this little boy. Yama says, I'm very pleased with you. Now that you have come all the way here, I'm ready to grant you 3 boons. You can choose whatever you wish. 3 boons are yours. Nachiketas immediately thinks and says, okay, boon number 1. I want my father not to be angry with me anymore. Very sweet of him. He says, while I left looking at my father and knew that he was still angry with me, and I know he will be very anxious after I left and he will be thinking about me. Please give him that comfort. May his anger come down, and when I go back, may he receive me with all love. That's my first boon. Very simple boon. Yama says, granted tathastu. Boon number 2, Nachiketas says, hey Yama, I want to know that secret formula in a yajna, that which when used will help one gain freedom from the tapatrayas. Please teach me that formula. Yama immediately looks at the boy and says, he was shocked when he asked the second question. The first question was very mundane, but the second question was slightly, against what Yama was expecting. So Yama looks at the boy and says, it's a good question, good boon to ask. Granted, tathastu. Not only I give you that formula, the yajna that will be performed for the ages to come will be named after you as Nachiketa Agni. Nachiketa Agni is one of those yajnas which are performed for freedom from tapatrayas. It's a different story that today we have lost. to connect with different yajnas. So there are hardly any who know how to perform a Nachiketa Agni. The third boon, now this is a shocker to Yama. Nachiketa looks face to face with Yama, eye to eye contact, and boldly asks this question, "Hey Yama, I seek to know what happens after death. I seek to know how the Atman journeys beyond. I seek to know what is moksha. I seek to know why an Atman comes back again to samsara." He comes up with a list of profound questions not expected of a little boy. Possibly Yama doesn't know that in our satsang such questions are asked. Yama would also be shocked when he comes to our satsang and sees how possibly there are budding Nachiketas in our satsang. Now Nachiketa, when he asks that question, Yama immediately is taken aback and he says, "You're too little. You're too little to know all this. Let me," he doesn't say this, but "let me give you a bunch of chocolates." Kind of tries to bribe him, saying that, "Let me give you, things with which you can enjoy. I will give you wealth. I will give you houses. I will give you cattle. I will also give you a good wife." All that, he tries to bribe him. And then Nachiketa is so very steadfast. He listens patiently to Yama and says, "Thank you for all this. I only want to know the truth. I only want to know answers to the questions that I have." Yama is finally pleased. And then what ensues is that glorious conversation. This Katopanishad, the conversation between Yama and Nachiketas, is almost has a parallel to Krishna-Arjuna Samvada in the Gita. Atmanam ratinam viddi, shariram ratamevatu, buddhim tu saratim viddi, manaha pragrahamevacha, indriyani hayanbhahu vishayanteshu gocharan, atmendriya manoptyaham bhoktestyahur manishinaha, Vijnana Saratiryastu Manaha Pragrahavannaraha Shodvanaha Paramatmoti Tadvishnoho Paramam Padam. Yama beautifully explains the Atma Swarupa, beautifully explains how the Atman is housed in a body. We all have discussed this analogy of a chariot. This is taken from the Katopanishad. The analogy of a chariot with 5 horses, the horses being the senses, the mind being the reins, the driver being the intellect, and the master sitting in the chariot being the Atman. Vijnana Saratiryastu Manaha Pragrahavannaraha Sodvanaha Paramapnoti Tadvishnoho Paramam Padam. In order to reach that Paramam Padam, that's Sri Vaikuntha, one needs to necessarily, he talks about the sadhana, how to gain mastery over the senses with the mind which acts as the reins which will control the senses. And then the mind has to be controlled by the intellect. And when this intellect is submitted to Bhagavan, then only then the chariot will take the right direction and travel on the path to Paramapada. So thus, not only that, he also teaches all the Arthapanchaka Jnana to Nachiketas. And Nachiketas eventually returns and he is received by his father. And we see how Nachiketas also becomes an illustrious rishi. This is the story of Yama and Nachiketas from Katopanishad. And then, what happens while we know the journey of life and the journey after death of the Atman, and eventually the Atman which takes the Sadgati of the Achiradi Marga reaches Vaikuntha, Paramapadam, what is the state of that moksha? That question is answered in the Chandogya Upanishad through a conversation between Indra, not through a conversation between a Prajapati and Indra and Virochana. As part of teaching Dahara Vidya, a beautiful declaration is given. This is also something which all of us have heard many times during our Gita sessions. We take this as an example to reflect on, where the state of Bhagavan as distinct and different from every entity is described. Apahadapapma, Vijaraha, Vimutyuhu, Vishokaha, Vichikitsaha, Apipashaha, Satyakamaha, Satyasankalpaha, Apahadapapma. Freedom from all kinds of karma. Bhagavan is Apahadapapma. not tainted by karma at all, blemishless. Akila heya prityanika. He is Kalyanaikatana, but he is also Akila Heya Prityanika, completely blemishless, not tainted by karma whatsoever. Apahata Papma, Vijaraha, Vijaraha Vimrutyuhu, no disease, no death, because he does not have any association like the Jivatma in samsara. Vijaraha Vimrutyuhu, with Prakriti. It is the association with Prakriti that brings disease and death to the Baddha Jivas. Vijaraha, Vimrutyuhu, Vijigitsaha, Apipasaha, no hunger, no thirst, no shoka, no vishokaha, Satyakamaha, Satyasankalpaha. He is Satyakama, he is Satyasankalpa. He is Satyakama. Whatever he wishes happens. Satyasankalpa. It is his will that governs everything in this universe. Now, after the Dahara Vidya, Prajapati Vidya deals with the state of moksha. In Prajapati Vidya, Prajapati is approached by Indra and Virochana. Virochana and Indra approach Prajapati and they seek to know Brahman. Prajapati looks at both of them and say, I have a test for you. And then get ready for a test, and he takes both of them and then he pours water into a vessel, into a large vessel, and he says, please go look into the vessel and come back. So both Indra and Virochana, they go to this vessel with the water and they look down into the vessel. They see their own reflections. Indra sees Indra, Virochana sees Virochana. Both of them come back. What do you see? Indra says, hey Prajapati, I see Indra, my reflection. Virochana says, hey Prajapati, I see Virochana, my reflection. Then Prajapati says, can you both go, get dressed up nicely, wear all your best clothes, all the nice ornaments, and come back? So both of them go, get dressed up nicely, wearing good clothes, good ornaments, then both come. And you both go and look into the vessel and then come back to me. Then both Indra and Virochana go in and they look into the vessel. They see their reflections and their reflections are beautiful. They are nicely, with all nice ornaments, good makeup. They look very nice, very pleasant, pleasing. They are very happy. And they look at their own mirror images. They come back more pleased than what they were before. Yes, we see Indra says the Indra the most handsome. Virochana says Virochana the most handsome. Prajapati says, now Prajapati says, remove all this, wear ordinary clothes and come back. And then he provokes them and he makes harsh statements and they become very, very sad. And he says, now can you go and look down and then come back? Both of them without their makeup and are also sad. And then they go and look up, they see their own and they are shocked to see. Many Indian actresses are like this. With makeup, without makeup. When they look at their own mirror image, they are also shocked. Like Virochana and Indra. They are shocked looking at their own images and they come back. Prajapati says, I understood why you are shocked. And Virochana then and there concludes, now I know who I am. Prajapati says, did you understand? He says, I understood who I am. I am Virochana, this body, because I can see. I see the reflection of the body and I says, I am the body and I have understood, enough is enough, goodbye, and he walks out. So the teaching is over. Virochana comes to a conclusion that I am the body and moves out. Indra is more patient. Indra says, I think I am the body, but I'm still not 100% sure. It cannot be that simple. Can you explain to me more? Then Prajapati takes him through an exercise of how to realize his true nature. And what ensues is celebrated as Prajapati Vidya, through which Prajapati teaches Indra how the Jivatma is distinct and different from the body. The Jivatma is Jnana Swarupa. The Jivatma Jnatritva, Anutva, Nanatva, Kartrutva, Bhogyatva, Seshatva, Paratantryatva, Shariratva, Adheyatva, Vidheyatva. All these characteristics of the Jivatma are explained, and in that process, Indra also understands that every Atman is distinct and different from its body. The stack of Prakriti is made up of not only the physical body, Physical body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, the prana, all are distinct and different from the Atman. Ajo nityaha shashvatoyam purano nahanyate anyamane sharire. As Krishna declares in the Gita, Atman is ajaha, puranaha, nityaha, shashvataha, distinct and different from its own body. Only when one starts to realize one's own nature, then one can start to experience the bliss that is latent to the Atman. And thus, eventually going on, Indra is taught Atma Vidya, Brahma Vidya, the Paramatma Vidya, and Indra finally is told, Prajapati also declares that to the question, what happens to the Atman once it reaches Vaikuntha, Paramapada, it's in a state of Moksha. The same answer initially that is given in Dahara Vidya, which is the Atman reaches a state which is called Samyapatti, sameness to the Paramatman. Apakatapapma, Vijaraha, Vimrityuhu, Vishokaha, Vijigitsaha, Apipasaha, Satyakamaha, Satyasankalpaha. Ashtavidha Samyapatti. Ashtavidha. Apakatapapma, Vijaraha, Vimrityuhu, Vishokaha, Vijigitsaha, Apipasaha, Satyakamaha, Satyasankalpaha. The Atma reaches that state of limitlessness, that limitless bliss in serving the Paramatma in Vaikuntha. The Atma experiences that limitless Ananda, limitless bliss, and therefore it is completely free of all karma, of all blemishes. It is free of hunger, thirst. It is free of disease, death. It is satya. All its wishes come true because it has attained the supreme fulfillment of its longing as it's reached the lotus feet of Bhagavan in Vaikuntha. It also becomes Satyakama, Satyasankalpa. The will of the Atman is completely aligned with the will of the Paramatma. That is the blissful state of Moksha. Thus, Indra is instructed by Prajapati on the state that an Atman attains upon Moksha. 5 simple stories, 5 profound truths. Seeking truth as we embark on the journey of knowing the reality. And in the process of journeying, cultivating foundational values, the 3 das, and in the process of the 3 das, one becomes a mumukshu, and staying in Grihasthashrama dharma, one can continue to accelerate in the journey of attaining the final destination. Knowing what happens to the Atman beyond death, knowing that there are multiple paths available to the Atman. There is a path which takes the Atman all the way to Swargaloka and brings it back. There is a path which takes the Atman down towards Narakalokas. And there is that glorious path, Achiradi Marga, which takes the Atman right to the doorstep of Vaikuntha. And then, what happens once we reach our destination? Again, as we discussed yesterday, Bhakti is the means to Mukti, and the blissful state of Mukti is qualified by Bhakti. Therefore, let us express our loving gratitude to all the rishis of the Upanishads who dedicated their lives. As we look around in the sacred land, this is the land, Devabhumi, where the rishis used to congregate, go around, spend time doing tapasya, engaging in conversations. Everywhere we walk, we are walking on the sand on which the rishis walked. The air that we are breathing today is the air that was breathed by the rishis of yore. So blessed we are that we are today able to discuss, relish some segments of the Upanishads thanks to these rishis. Counting our blessings, let us continue to keep engaged with the teachings of these rishis and continue to pray that these rishis bless us so that we too, like them, acquire Brahmajnana. Sarvam Sri Krishnarpanamastu.